Greetings, everyone. Again, I'm Reverend Mike Gregg, pastor of Royal Lane Baptist Church, and I am here with Reverend Wes Helm, the Faith Formations Manager of Faith in Texas, and a good friend. And we were wondering, this is the dress code for Stressed Ministers Week. So if all the stressed ministers out there, if you want to wear your denim shirts, then please do so. But I'm glad to talk to him. Wes is a good friend, and we've been working as Royal Lane Baptist Church has been working along with other congregations in the city with Faith in Texas on housing equity and justice. And so I wanted to approach Wes, you with just a question of what's going on in the housing world, especially those of us who are fighting for housing justice. What's going on during this particular pandemic and crisis? It's people who are housing insecure need protection all the time, but especially now with evictions and utility cutoffs and other things, not being able to pay rent or mortgages. What is going on with Faith in Texas and your work right now?
Yeah, and there's a lot that's happening for folks. I mean, and you kind of nailed one of the critical points of this, which is, a lot of people were in trouble before COVID-19 hit. We had an affordable 6% of Dallas residents housing burden, meaning that they were spending 30% more of their paycheck on rent, and that was before. And then overnight, our unemployment has skyrocketed. And all of a sudden, we have a lot of folks that are not getting paychecks or getting drastically reduced paychecks. While at the same time, the wheels of the rent and the mortgage machine are still turning. So when April 1st rolled around, the rent's due. And for a lot of our folks, particularly for tenants, for renters, they were getting emails or letters on their door from their landlord saying, make no mistake, rent is due on April 1st. And if you don't pay, we will file an eviction order on you. So we have a lot of folks who are very, very vulnerable. This has pushed it from being a spring crisis to a boiling one. We have a lot of folks who are in danger of losing their homes. And there's more to it than just tenants, though. It's part of what's going on with this is most of our landlords don't own their buildings. Those buildings are financed and their mortgage is still due. So we have a lot of landlords who are trying to figure out, how do I pay my bills and keep open in the midst of all of this? And what's happening is the screws are getting turned on their renters. So fortunately, there's been a number of things to help tenants in this time so that we don't have a massive wave of eviction as we're being told to shelter in our homes. Early on, the Dallas County Justice of the Peace made a statement that they will not have any new eviction hearings until, I believe it is May 18th. I believe that'll probably be extended as well, if I had to guess. And they won't issue and are halting the execution of any writs of possession. And what that basically means is, if you were facing eviction before, there's not going to be any new hearings on that, and the constables are not going to come and kick you out of your place. That's all been put to a halt. And that's great news. We've also seen action at both the city, county, and state level to stop utilities from being cut off, because a lot of people were vulnerable to having their utilities cut off. And in the very early days of shelter at home, we were seeing counties that were, in fact, cutting off people's utilities in the midst of this crisis. But the Public Utility Commission of Texas issued a statewide halt on cutoffs for people impacted by COVID-19. And you do have to get on a list showing that you're impacted for that to apply to you. So it's not a full moratorium on utility cutoffs, but it goes a long way to being sure that people aren't living without electricity, without water during this time. What's left undone and what's still really needed is that we still have folks that are getting notices from their landlords saying, yes, we can't evict you right now. Or usually they don't say we can't evict you right now. But saying, if you don't pay rent, we're going to file an eviction. And you can still file an eviction. It's just not going to have a hearing for a while. But a lot of times tenants don't know that. So what we saw starting on April 1st and right before was folks getting letters from their landlord saying, we will evict. You have to pay rent. You have to pay it in full. A lot of times saying things like, you just need to go out and get a job at a pharmacy or at an Amazon warehouse and basically find a way to work because you got to pay your rent. A lot of pretty heartless letters that can really drive people to desperate action. So, and the other thing that can still happen with this is you can still get a notice to vacate on your door. A lot of times what happens when you're being evicted is you don't pay and they say we're going to file an eviction. You have 24, 48, or 72 hours to vacate the premises. And a lot of times people voluntarily will get their stuff and leave because they don't want their stuff getting set out on the curb by a constable, not realizing that there's a whole process of eviction that's yet to come. And they are not obligated by that notice to vacate to leave their home. So we're really concerned about vulnerable people getting those notices to vacate and ending up out on the street in the midst of this crisis. And I mean, that obviously poses a huge moral problem. When we're asking people to shelter in home, we need to do everything we can do to protect their home and be sure that it's safe and secure. It also presents a public health problem.
Are you saying that tenants don't know what's going on as far as the policies and procedures in place to protect them?
Right, exactly. And in the state of Texas, tenants have very few rights, but you do have some, and particularly under this crisis, you have some special protection from the justice of the peace.
So how are you leaning into landlords and helping them to know what to do to provide justice for their tenants?
Yeah, and the good news is it's not all bad news. One of the, we've seen some landlords acting in ways that are unconscionable, but we've also seen some landlords really stepping up and taking action to work with their tenants, to protect their tenants, ranging from, we've seen apartment complexes in California and in New York who have voluntarily written their tenants and said, for the next 3 months, you don't have to pay rent. Now, you don't have to pay it for 3 months, and then in 3 months, it's all going to be due, but we are waiving rent until September in one case. But we've also seen a lot of landlords extending generous payment plans, waiving late fees. We've seen one case with an apartment complex here in Dallas at the Camden Farmers Market, where a large corporate landlord created a $5 million relief fund that for their tenants to be able to apply for relief and help, and said, we know that a lot of you are unemployed and you need more than just rent. You need food, you need medical care in a lot of cases, especially since we lost our paid sick leave benefits. A lot of people don't have health care in the state of Texas. So we've seen landlords really stepping up in a lot of ways to be sure their tenants are taken care of and be sure that no one is in fear of losing their home. And those are great things. And we're working with Faith in Texas to create a just housing landlord pledge. That's a set of best practices for landlords. Things like, letting their tenants know we're not going to be pursuing eviction, but not only that, we're not going to increase your rent during this crisis. We're going to eliminate late charges and other fees. We're going to not charge you for amenities that you can't presently use, or give you a discount on your rent since you can't use those amenities if it's already built in. Doing things like providing incentives for on-time or early rent payments. And getting out in front of increasing cleanliness in common areas and providing sanitation wipes and things like that in common areas, as well as providing the right kind of treatment for their workers as well. Doing things like ensuring their workers have paid sick leave so people aren't feeling pressured to come into work with critical apartment staff, like maintenance workers, when they're sick. Being sure that their essential workers have personal protective equipment, so that if we have a maintenance worker that has to go for an essential maintenance call, let's be sure they have a mask and have gloves where we're not risking further spreading the virus, both for protection of workers and for tenants. So we're working on that as a way that we can lift up the really good practices that we see some landlords doing, and also encourage other landlords to do the right thing and really step up and do their part during this, to be sure everybody's taken care of. Because one of the ways we're really looking at this is the only way we're going to get through this is if we share the burden according to our ability, not our vulnerability. A lot of times in moments of crisis, the greatest economic burden, the greatest medical burden gets pushed down to those who are most vulnerable because they're least able to advocate for themselves. We want to be sure in the world of housing that people are sharing the burden according to their ability. And a lot of our landlords, especially our large landlords, have extraordinary resources they can lean on. I mean, make no mistake, this is a trying time for landlords too. They have bills to pay. They're not going to have the cash flow they used to have to be able to do that, to be able to do maintenance. They've got a lot of things they're wrestling to figure out, just like everybody else. But they also have greater ability to negotiate with mortgage lenders to get deferrals. They also are more likely to have large cash reserves or access to loans and credits that can help them weather this crisis than somebody who just got laid off their hospitality industry job, or a gig worker whose entire market has just dried up. So we're saying, we know we're asking you to carry out a big part of this burden, but that's because you have the ability to carry it. And right now, these folks just don't. And let's get through this together so that when we come out the other side, we'll come out a strong community together.
That's good. So it sounds like y'all are working with trying to get landlords to take a pledge to get through this together. I heard that there's some holdup within city council and with the mayor. Can you describe a little bit more about where the city needs to be at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. So I talked earlier about where we're at on eviction, that we have kind of the last stage of the eviction process where you actually have a constable coming out to remove you. We have put a halt to that, but we still have tenants that are getting notices to vacate. We still have tenants being threatened with eviction. The city can do something about that. And what they can do is they can pass an emergency ordinance. It's called a right to secure ordinance. And what that means is it says that landlords are required, once somebody doesn't pay their rent, they're required to give them 60 days to respond to a proposed eviction. So let's say, Mike, you don't pay your rent next month. That means that if I'm your landlord, I've got to give you a notice saying, hey, I'm proposing an eviction because you haven't paid your rent. Now you have 60 days to either pay me or otherwise respond to this or negotiate with me before I can file an eviction, before I can begin that process. So it buys people time, which is critical right now, because we know that there is relief coming from the federal government. Our city is working really hard to put together relief programs as well, using funds from the government. But a lot of that hadn't hit the ground yet. So we need to buy people some time before we start slapping notices to vacate on their doors. 5 council members signed a memo proposing that type of ordinance in Dallas, led by Councilmember Adam Basildua. Unfortunately, that ordinance was not prioritized. It was not brought before council last week. The mayor pushed it to one of the 2 ad hoc committees. Let's see if I can get this right by memory. The ad hoc committee on human and social relief and assistance, which is led by Councilmember Adam Magoo. So they met up last Thursday and did not talk about this ordinance. So every day the clock is ticking for tenants. Every day that we fail to act as a city is another day that somebody may leave their apartment and go out on the street because they are fearing eviction and because they've got one of these notices to vacate. It's really critical that we get this emergency ordinance passed as soon as possible to bring full protection for tenants. And folks can help with that. The best thing that you can do is you can write an email to or make a call to your city council member and to the mayor, calling for this kind of protection. And we made a really easy way to do that. If you don't want to look up the contact information for your council member, even if you don't know who your council member is, if you go to bit.ly, that's bit.ly/emergency ordinance, So bit.ly/emergency ordinance. It's going to take you to a Faith in Texas webpage where there's a letter, a form letter already queued up that you can edit if you want to or send it as is. You just type in your address and it will automatically find who your council member is and give you the ability to send that email to the mayor and to your council member. We've had over 150 people take action doing that so far. Every one of those emails helps create pressure and show the urgency, and that we as a community feel a lot of urgency about this ordinance passing.
Thank you for that. My last question to you is going to be about what can we do as faith leaders and faith communities and people of faith, which will be important. So that's one way to turn to contact our officials. Is there anything else besides that we can do?
Yeah, there's a lot of great things that you can do to help with this. One is look after each other. Contribute to your congregation. Contribute to your congregation's benevolence fund, because a lot of people are going to need help. And that's not going to come from one place. We need public policy to address that in a systematic way. But we also need our existing safety nets, which include our faith community, to function during this time. Another great thing is that you can do is if you are a tenant and your income, your livelihood is not disrupted by COVID-19, if you're like me and you're able to work from home and you're still kind of gathering a paycheck, pay your rent.
Yep.
The fact of the matter is our landlords need cash coming in to be able to maintain their buildings. And the more people are paying the rent, the easier it is for them to work with people who are not. And the more generous they can afford to be with people who are not. So one thing you can do is just if you're not disrupted, pay your rent. Even consider paying your rent early if you're able to, because it doesn't hurt you and it really helps your landlord to be able to be stable and again to be able to do better with those who are not able to pay rent right now. Now, if you're in the other side of that, if you are a tenant and you're not able to pay rent for whatever reason, if your work has been disrupted, if you are unemployed because of this crisis, the key thing that we are hearing from folks, besides advocating for yourself by supporting things like the emergency ordinance, contact your landlord early, tell them what's going on, and start negotiating with them. And keep in mind, you may not get a favorable response at first. It depends on who your landlord is. It depends on what their perspective is. If you don't get a favorable response, remember that next time you're leasing. But contact them early and stay in communication with them throughout. We have seen a lot of cases where people begin a process and their landlord says, no, I can't afford to do anything. And later on, if things change, their landlord has come back to them and said, you know what, we have been able to get the cash we need. We can work with you more. Or even in some cases saying, you know what, we've heard a lot about this. We're going to waive your rent this month. So stay in communication, talk with your landlord early. Same with your utilities. Most utilities are voluntarily waiving all cutoffs right now and offering payment plans, and in some cases, waiving charges where they can. So the sooner you can get in contact with your providers, with your landlord, the better situation you're going to be in. For everybody, I mean, like I said, continue to advocate for fair housing practices. That means signing that ordinance or that letter or an email about passing an emergency ordinance. Also be in communication with us. As we roll out this Just Housing Pledge for landlords, we're going to be looking for landlords we can communicate with us about. Think about getting in contact with us about how you can share that with your landlord and get them to sign on. Or if you have a landlord who perhaps is not rising to the occasion right now, we'd love to talk with you about how to organize with other tenants in your building to put pressure for them to adopt more generous practices and adopt practices more in line with what we consider to be best practices for landlords at this moment. And you can reach me at whelm.
Okay. the internet connection kind of phased out. So just in case people didn't get that, can you say your contact information one more time?
Yeah, sure. You can get me the best way to reach me by email. My email address is whelm, WHELM, at faithintx.org.
Got it. All right, my friend. Thank you for that good information. As we are considering those who need our assistance and our help, this is another place that we can make a difference. So thank you for your continued good information and good help as we look at those who need protection, who are housing insecure in this time. So again, I'm with Reverend Wes Helm, Faith Formations Manager of Faith in Texas. I'm Mike Gregg, pastor of Royal Lane Baptist Church. So glad you're with us today, and we'll see you on the next interview.